were stunned. They'd never seen a tank like this before. Nothing they had could stop it. The British designed, British built Centurion. Tearing up the steepest hills, this heavy metal monster seemed to defy gravity. More than 60 years later, the Cold War superstar is still a contender. The Centurion wasn't a static design. Unlike other tanks, it could be upgraded, up-armored, and up-gunned. Major upgrades resulted in a new mark number. By the early 1960s, this chameleon tank had been assigned 13 different mark numbers. Oshawa, Ontario. It's 20 degrees below zero. In Canada, tank crews get to play in the snow. But this is no private playground. It's the museum of the Royal Canadian Armoured Corps Ontario Regiment. Like the Duxford crew, they are also working on a Centurion tank. Their tank is a Mk V-2 designation.
Restoring a tank is like eating an elephant. You do it one bite at a time.
Located in the industrial town of Oshawa, the museum has a modest collection of 8 tanks and 40 other vehicles. Frozen but unstoppable, the crew of volunteers are totally dedicated. Brian Budd works shifts as a foreman at a nuclear power station. Scott Boyd is a bricklayer, volunteer firefighter, and Brian's brother-in-law. Any chance they get, they are here moving mountains of steel, wire, and rust.
Well, we've got a Centurion built about 1952, and I've essentially have a puzzle box with no picture, and this is what I have to finish and restore and fix up. But I'll have to tear it down to pretty well almost right down to its bare hull if we can. Our biggest concern, though, is we can't take off the turret just because we don't have the facilities for it. Luckily, we have another Centurion parked out front of the museum that we can open up and scavenge parts from. But hopefully we don't have the same broken parts on it. So it's more of a case of salvage what you can, refurbish what you can, and if you can't, well, we have to do without or find some other way of, some other museum that's desperate to get rid of Centurion parts.
Yeah, we need some extra weight on that to pull it back.
Now, unfortunately, it's got nothing inside it, so it's pretty well gutted except for a drivetrain and a driver's seat.
This gate guard is beyond salvage and is being used as a parts donor. The real museum piece is buried in snow out back, waiting for spring.
1, 2, 3.
There.
How long has this thing been sitting here?
It's driven into place about 20 years ago.
I believe it. It's coming. Gentle. Holy moly.
What we're hoping to get out of here is a pair of radiators, but trying to figure out how to get the radiators out is a royal nightmare.
We're getting stuck.
Main designs of the Centurion was they had to be so heavy, had to have such an armament, had to go so fast, but they never thought of the poor buggers got to work on it.
In search of missing parts and possible treasures, Brian and Scott spend a Saturday afternoon in the small town of Acton at the Royal Canadian Legion Hall.
What's he want, 25 bucks for?
I don't know. It says 25. I thought that was 25 feet.
The big thing is to find whatever, mainly bits and pieces, like being a Centurion, parts are so specific, it's almost impossible to get something specific to a Centurion.
But every now and then, Brian's refusal to quit wins out.
Hey, Scott, you know that'll work off a 42 set, one of our radios.
Yep.
So go for the correct radio for the Centurion. And the thing's brand new. Like, wow. The whole idea is you have around your mouth when you're talking, and you're just keying the microphone by pushing the button, which I'm assuming that's a button because I've never used one of these before. And to find one of these old things, not covered in dust, and brand new. Still, the grease paper on it was like, you almost want to just keep it bundled up and sell it on eBay like those Star Wars action figures. Still in original packaging.
The Centurion is over 7.5 meters long. It weighs about 52 metric tons, roughly the weight of 40 family-sized cars. Its 650 horsepower Rolls-Royce engine is capable of producing a top speed of roughly 40 kilometers or 24 miles per hour. Oshawa volunteers are hammering away on their massive tank overhaul.
This is the 4th day of being here for probably 6 to 8 hours a day.
Frank Moore is working on the Centurion's auxiliary engine.
It's far more practical if the tank is sitting in a station, per se, overseeing an area, that type of thing, that they would run this little engine here to get all their electric power for radios and the fighting compartment and interior lighting and anything else that they would have to have. The main battery feed wire up to the start control panel was missing. The ignition coil was plugged into the wrong terminal over here. Had to pull the carburetor all apart, clean it all out because it had dried out 20 years ago.
Here is where brains and expertise make up for no money and not enough time.
Hey, we got power. It might start. Hey, it's running. Hey, there she goes. Hey, the governor just got in. Quick, get the boiling vessel and we'll make tea. And that's the light that tells you when tea is ready. But not bad for sitting, not running for 20 plus years. Gee, it even idles. Isn't this nice? Hey!
Okay, let's go for a beer.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
This is a major step forward, getting this, because we can install this in the tank, hook up the rest of the cooling system without the main engine being in, as long as we seal off those pipes, and we can run all the electrical system to troubleshoot our electrical system. But this is a really good day today.
The main battle tank for Britain was a key part of the NATO arsenal. Over 4,400 were produced and sold around the world between 1946 and 1962. With 13 marked designations, it was so adaptable and far ahead of its time, it is still in action today. Springtime in Oshawa. This Canadian crew finally gets to work on restoring their Centurion Mk V -2. John Allison is a heavy equipment mechanic. He's been volunteering at the museum for 2 years. The crew gets down to business in the engine bay.
Right now we're using a dime.
You want to check those?
Brian is anxious to test his swap meet finds.
Just to see if the stuff we got in Acton was going to be usable at all. The original issues we run into with the Centurion is there's so many different marks. The manuals we have for the Mark 1, 2, 3, 4. This one's supposed to be a Mark V/2. So wires been tacked in here, tacked in there. You end up with all kinds of modifications. Right now we're kind of semi-guessing.
With the wiring sorted out, Brian's crew goes back to the donor Centurion to salvage some parts.
Where's the, well, we've been trying to get the transmission out now for about 3 months, so progress is slow. This one hasn't moved in about 20 years, so what we've got is a lot of seized nuts, bolts. None of the moving parts have been moving for 20 years.
A former mechanic with the Canadian Forces, Bruce Wyatt joins in to help out.
It doesn't want to move. I'm reefing on those bolts pretty hard. I don't want to strip the threads or snap them off.
Well, if you come back next winter, we should have at least 6 bolts out. If we're doing good, we might even have 12, but we're not going to push our luck.
These guys aren't in it for the money or the glory. Their reward lies far off in the next decade.
Maybe you can subtitle this The Never-Ending Tank Story.